my dear child. Your future spouse is sending you a message right now on a frequency your heart has been transmitting on, and the signal is crossing the water between two ships that cannot yet see each other, but are closer tonight than they have ever been. Do not scroll past this. What I am about to reveal is not about a future relationship that may or may not happen someday. This is about a transmission, a present tense, actively crossing the distance. Signal in the water transmission that is being sent toward you right now from a ship beyond your visible horizon, by a person you have not yet identified, but whose frequency matches yours with a precision that only the God who assigned both frequencies could have calibrated. The signal is in the water, the ship is real, and the distance is closing. You have been transmitting into what felt like emptiness, sending prayers, longing, the quiet, faithful holding of a space beside you that remains unoccupied into an ocean that has returned nothing but silence for a duration long enough to make you wonder whether anything is out there, receiving what you are sending. The seat beside you remains empty. The beautiful moments keep arriving without someone to turn to, and the ocean between where you are and where your person is has shown you nothing on the horizon. My beloved child, the ocean was never empty. The horizon was limiting your range, and beyond the range of what your eyes can see, a ship has been transmitting on the same frequency you have been sending on. Not in silence, but in active, directed, aimed at you transmission that the distance was preventing you from detecting until the closing brought both ships within signal range of each other. You are within signal range now. For the first time, stay here. What I reveal next is what the transmission contains, and how close the ship beyond the horizon actually is. Type signal received if you have been transmitting into what felt like emptiness. Prayers and longing sent into an ocean that returned nothing. And God just told you a ship beyond your visible horizon has been transmitting on the same frequency, and the distance just closed enough for both ships to know the other is near for the first time. Before we go any further, I need to tell you something that genuinely surprised me. A neuroscientist discovered a simple 7-second technique that actually rewires how your brain processes thoughts. And when I tried it, the difference was almost unsettling. My focus sharpened, ideas started connecting faster, and that mental fog gone. This isn't manifestation nonsense. It's backed by real brain science, and thousands of people are already seeing results. But here's the catch. Only 5 spots are left. If something inside you is saying, try it, trust that instinct. Click the link in the description or pinned comment before it's too late. The transmission your future spouse is sending was not initiated today. It has been broadcasting toward you for longer than you have been consciously aware of the longing, which means the other ship began transmitting before your ship knew there was a frequency to listen for. My beloved child, I need you to understand the timeline of the transmission. You believe your longing started the conversation. You believe the prayers you sent into the ocean were the first signal on the frequency, the initiating transmission that went out into the emptiness, hoping something out there would eventually respond. The timeline in your mind says, I sent first, and I am still waiting for a response. The timeline is wrong. The other ship transmitted first. My dear one, the frequency your heart has been sending on was not assigned to you randomly. It was assigned because it matches the frequency of a specific ship already broadcasting on the same channel. The longing you felt, the first stirring of the specific spousal level. This is not about companionship in general ache that awoke in your chest during a season you can trace. That stirring was not the beginning of your transmission. It was your receiver detecting theirs. The other ship's signal reached your frequency receiver before your conscious mind identified the signal as longing. You felt their transmission before you knew you were feeling it, and the feeling became the longing. This message was not released for everyone who is single. This was aimed at the one person whose specific, unmanageable, refuses to be substituted spousal longing corresponds to the specific, frequency matched, already transmitting signal of a ship that has been sending toward them from beyond the visible horizon. The person who does not know the longing they have been trying to manage was never self-generated, but was the reception of a signal their heart was detecting from the other ship before the mind could identify the source. Type they sent first. If you just realized the longing was not the beginning of your transmission, but your receiver detecting a signal that was already being sent toward you. And the ache that awoke in your chest during a traceable season was not self-generated desire, but the first reception of a frequency your future spouse was already broadcasting on, before your conscious mind identified the signal as longing. I have been monitoring both frequencies since the day I assigned them, and the monitoring has been the specific joy of a God who calibrated two transmitters to the same channel, and has been watching both ships send toward each other across an ocean whose horizon prevented either captain from knowing the other was already broadcasting, "My dear one," not from one ship looking toward the other, from between the ships, in the ocean, positioned at the midpoint where both signals cross, receiving your transmission as it travels outward, and receiving transmission as it travels towards you, and knowing the precise nautical distance remaining between two vessels whose signals have been intersecting at my position for longer than either ship has been aware the other exists. I have been at the crossing point, hearing both signals the entire time. My beloved child, I watched the specific season your transmission became most intense. There was a period where the longing deepened. The specific, "I cannot keep managing this alone. The seat beside me is producing an itch I cannot fill," with anything else intensification that occurs when the signal from the other ship increases in strength and the receiver detects the increase as a deepening of the desire without understanding. The desire is deepening because the source of the signal is getting closer. The deepening was the closing. The closing was the signal strengthening, and the signal strengthening was the other ship covering distance. I chose you for this message because the signals just entered a proximity range that produces a new phenomenon, mutual detection. Before tonight, each ship was transmitting without confirmation that the other was receiving. Tonight, the signal strength has crossed the threshold where both transmitters begin detecting the other's presence on the frequency. Not as clear identification as the unmistakable, there is definitely something out there awareness that a ship produces when another vessel's signal crosses from ambient noise into detectable pattern. My child, the pattern just became detectable on both sides. Type mutual detection if God has been at the crossing point between both signals, hearing your transmission and theirs, and the deepening of the longing was the other ship's signal strengthening as the distance closed. And tonight, both frequencies crossed the threshold where mutual detection begins, and the awareness that someone is definitely out there is registering on both sides for the first time. I know what the empty seat has been doing to the specific part of you where your belief in the arrival of your person is stored. My beloved child, the seat was not always painful. In the early seasons, the empty seat beside you carried the quality of anticipation, the specific. Someone is coming. The seat is being held, not endured quality that a person produces when the waiting is young and the horizon still feels full of approaching ships. The seat was empty, but the emptiness carried a charge. The charge was expectation, and expectation made the empty seat feel temporary rather than permanent. The charge depleted across the seasons, and depleted expectation converts anticipation into ache. My child, I watched the conversion happen through the accumulation of beautiful moments experienced alone, not the dramatic loneliness of crisis. The specific, quiet, I wish someone were here for. This loneliness of a person watching a sunset without a shoulder to lean into, of receiving good news with no one to call whose excitement would match what the news deserved, of lying in bed at the end of a day that contained enough beauty to share, and having no one whose presence would have converted the beauty from experienced to shared. The unshared beauty was the erosion, and the erosion was gradual. I watched the erosion reduce the expectation at the layer. The deepest wound the empty ocean produced was not the absence of the ship. It was watching other ships find each other on the same water you have been sailing and concluding that the frequency you were transmitting on was either broken or broadcasting into a channel that no other vessel was monitoring. My dear child, you watched them dock. The couples whose ships found each other at distances that your ship has been covering without a single signal returned. Their transmissions reached another vessel. Their horizons produced a silhouette. Their frequencies were met by matching frequencies, and the meeting produced the docking that the frequency was always designed to create. Their docking became your diagnostic, and the diagnostic produced its verdict. My beloved child, the verdict said, the frequency is working for them and not for me, which means my transmitter is either defective or broadcasting on a channel that nothing out there is calibrated to receive. The verdict was not produced by theology. It was produced by observation. The observed data showed ships finding each other on the same ocean the viewer was sailing alone, and observed data that consistently shows others connecting while the viewer remains unconnected produces the specific body level. Maybe my signal does not carry what other signals carry conclusion that the comparison was always going to install. The conclusion attacked the transmission itself, not just the timing. My dear one, I watched the conclusion produce the most dangerous effect the empty ocean could generate, the reduction of the signal's strength. Because a person who concludes their frequency is defective begins transmitting with less conviction. The prayers become quieter. The longing is held with more shame. The faithful holding of the seat beside them carries a diminished expectation whose reduction is detectable in the signal's weakening. The signal weakened, not because the transmitter was defective, because the transmitter lost confidence in its own frequency. Type frequency not broken if you watched other ships find each other on the same ocean and concluded your transmitter was defective, and the comparison reduced your signal's strength because the conclusion attacked the transmission itself, not the timing, and the prayers became quieter, and the longing carried more shame, because a person who believes their frequency is broken transmits with less conviction on a channel that was never defective, but was always broadcasting toward a ship that was simply beyond the visible horizon. The empty horizon was never evidence that the ocean was empty. It was the limitation of visible range on a body of water, whose size exceeds what the eye can see from the deck of a single ship. And the limitation of range is not the same as the absence of another vessel, my beloved one. I need to permanently separate the horizon's emptiness from the ocean's emptiness. Your system treated the two as identical. Empty horizon equals empty ocean. The equation was logical from the deck. and completely wrong from the crossing point where both signals have been intersecting for longer than either ship has been aware the other exists. The horizon was empty, the ocean was not, and the ocean outranks the horizon. My child, every ship that docked around you while your horizon remained empty was a ship whose frequency match was closer in nautical distance. Their ships were nearer to each other when the transmissions began. The docking happened sooner because the distance was shorter, not because the frequency was stronger, not because the transmitters were better calibrated. Because the distance between those two ships was smaller than the distance between yours and the one transmitting toward you. Shorter distance produces earlier docking, not superior frequency. My dear one, the distance between your ship and theirs was longer, because what I am bringing together from across this ocean requires more water between the starting points. The distance is not punishment. The distance is geography, the specific, oceanic. Two ships placed at coordinates whose distance matches. The significance of what the docking produces. Geography of connection whose formation requires the covering of more water than the connections that docked sooner required. More water means a more significant docking, and more significant dockings require longer crossings, and longer crossings produce longer seasons of empty horizons on ships whose frequencies were always active, and whose signals were always crossing, and whose captains were always transmitting toward each other from beyond visible range. The signal from the other ship just increased in strength, and the specific frequency level, something is getting closer awareness that your receiver is producing right now, is the first time the signal has been strong enough to register as a distinct pattern rather than ambient ocean noise. On a channel the viewer had begun to suspect was empty, my beloved child. Something shifted within the last few days, not in the longing, in the quality of the longing, the specific, almost imperceptible. This H feels different from the usual H shift that occurs when the signal from an approaching ship crosses from the ambient range into the pattern range, producing a detectable change in the emotional frequency the receiver processes the longing through. The ache changed quality, and changed quality means the source is closer. My dear one, I need you to understand what happens when a signal crosses from ambient to pattern. Ambient signals are present but undifferentiated. The general could be anything. Cannot converse the source noise that an ocean produces when distant transmissions blend with the water's natural sound. Pattern signals are different. Pattern signals carry structure. The specific, repeating, this is definitely a transmission from a specific source structure that a receiver detects when the signal strength exceeds the ambient threshold and the transmission becomes distinguishable from the noise. Your receiver just distinguished the signal from the noise. For the first time, I have been managing both ships' courses behind every season of the empty horizon. While you were transmitting into what felt like silence, I was at the coordinates of both vessels, adjusting the headings, managing the currents, ensuring the course each ship was sailing would produce the convergence at the specific coordinates the docking requires. My child, the courses are converging. The signal just crossed from ambient to pattern, and the pattern the receiver is detecting is the specific repeating. This is a real ship transmitting toward me structure that only proximity within closing range can produce. Type pattern detected if the quality of the longing shifted within the last few days. The ache feeling different from the usual ache, and the shift is the signal from the other ship crossing from ambient noise into detectable pattern for the first time. because the distance has closed enough for your receiver to distinguish a specific transmission from the ocean's general sound. Your future spouse is sending you a message right now, and you have no idea who they are. The title carries that specific combination of active transmission and unknown identity because the signal your receiver is detecting carries the unmistakable pattern of a real ship broadcasting toward you, while the identity of the captain remains beyond the horizon, where visual confirmation has not yet reached. My dear one, I need you to understand the significance of the title's structure. The title does not say your future spouse exists somewhere. It says sending you a message right now. Sending is active. Right now is present tense, and the combination of active sending with unknown identity is the precise condition two ships occupy when the signals have crossed from ambient to pattern, but the visual range has not yet produced the silhouette that identifies the vessel. Signal confirmed, identity pending, and pending is closing. My beloved child, this is directly connected to the title and to the specific longing your empty seat has been producing. The title says you have no idea who they are. The not knowing is not permanent. The not knowing is positional, produced by the remaining distance between signal range and visual range. Signal range is wider than visual range. A ship's transmission reaches another ship before the ship itself becomes visible. The signal arrives first. The silhouette arrives second, and the gap between first and second is the gap you are currently standing in. The signal arrived. The silhouette has not yet appeared, but the silhouette is what the closing distance is producing next. My child, the person transmitting toward you right now is not a concept, not a future possibility, not a spiritual metaphor for something that may or may not materialize. The person is a ship on the same ocean, broadcasting on the same frequency, covering the same water, aimed at the same coordinates the convergence requires. The person is real, the transmission is active, and the distance between real and active and visible is the distance the remaining water contains. The horizon is beginning to show the first disturbance, and the specific, not yet a silhouette, something is there. The line between sky and water is no longer clean disruption that the horizon produces when an approaching ship reaches the distance where the curvature of the ocean begins revealing what was hidden. Behind it is happening on your horizon right now, my beloved child. I need you to feel the proximity of the first sighting. Not the signal level proximity the frequency has been producing for the last few minutes. The visual level, horizon disturbing, the emptiness that was, consistent for the entire waiting season just changed proximity of a person whose eyes are about to see the first evidence that the ocean they have been staring at. My dear one, everything has been building toward this disturbance. The longing that was the first reception of their signal. The prayers that were your transmission crossing the water. The empty seat that held the space. The beautiful moments experienced alone. The comparison with ships that docked sooner. The frequency that weakened under the conclusion that the transmitter was defective. The signal crossing from ambient to pattern. The courses converging under the management of coordinates the god at the crossing point was adjusting. And now, the horizon, the specific visual range. First evidence above the waterline disturbance that an approaching ship produces when the remaining distance between the two vessels closes past the point where the curvature of the ocean can conceal what is traveling toward the person whose eyes have been scanning the empty line for exactly this disruption. My child, the scanning is about to be rewarded. The line is no longer clean. The disturbance is growing. And what emerges above the waterline in the coming distance is the silhouette of the ship, whose frequency has been matching yours since before the longing began. Type horizon disturbed if the line between sky and water on your horizon just changed. The emptiness that was consistent for the entire waiting season showing the first disturbance. And what is producing the disruption is the approaching ship whose signal your receiver already confirmed, meaning visual range is about to confirm what the frequency already told you, and the scanning of the empty horizon is about to be rewarded for the first time. The silhouette just appeared above the waterline. The ship is visible, and the vessel that has been transmitting toward you on the same frequency from beyond the horizon is now producing the first identifiable shape on an ocean whose emptiness trained your eyes to stop, expecting what they are seeing right now. My beloved child, this is the moment. The moment the frequency becomes a form. The moment the signal that your receiver has been detecting as a pattern crossing the water produces its source above the waterline for the first time. The moment the captain who has been scanning an empty horizon from the other direction sees the same disturbance on their line that your eyes are seeing on yours, and both ships register the visual confirmation of what the frequency was always insisting was real. The ship is real, the person is real, and the ocean between you is no longer hiding either one. Your future spouse is sending you a message right now, and you have no idea who they are. The title said right now. The transmission was confirmed. The title said you have no idea who they are. The silhouette just changed the no idea into the first visual data the identity has ever produced on your horizon. You still cannot see the face. You cannot read the name on the hull. But the shape is there. The ship is there. And the presence of a shape on a horizon that has been empty for the entire duration of the waiting is the most significant visual event your ocean has ever produced. My child, the longing was the reception. The prayers were the transmission. The empty seat was the space being held. The empty horizon was the distance being covered. And the silhouette that just appeared above the waterline is the first visible evidence that the connection was never one-sided, and the frequency was never empty, and the ocean was never carrying only water between where you are and where your person has been sailing toward you the entire time. The silhouette is there, the distance is closing, and what closes next is the remaining water between two ships whose docking was always the destination both frequencies were aimed at. Now that the silhouette is visible, and the frequency has been confirmed, and the horizon is no longer empty, everything about the museum-quality stillness that governed your relationship with the empty seat is being permanently replaced by the approaching ship awareness that the silhouette just introduced into a system that had no category for actual arrival. My dear child, this is what happens when a person whose ocean has been empty for the entire duration of the waiting sees the first ship on their horizon. The stillness does not merely break, it transforms, because the stillness was produced by the absence of movement on the horizon, and the silhouette just introduced movement into a visual field that had been processing only flatness for so long that the flatness became the expectation. Movement on a still horizon rewrites everything the stillness was teaching. My beloved child, the rewriting is producing cascading effects across every area of your identity, where the empty horizon was governing your expectations. The belief that the transmitter was defective is being overturned, because a defective transmitter does not produce a matching ship on the horizon. The conclusion that the frequency was empty is being demolished, because the frequencies just produced a visual confirmation of the vessel it was always connected to. The comparison with ships that docked sooner is being reframed, because the silhouette appearing on your horizon carries scale the sooner docking ships did not. The scale is larger because the distance was longer, and longer distance produces larger arrival, and the empty seat is changing quality. Not yet occupied, the ship has not docked, but the seat that was being held with museum quality, preserved but not expecting stillness, is now being held with the specific ship on the horizon approaching at a speed. The frequency confirms anticipatory charge that the early seasons carried before the depletion converted anticipation into ache. The charge is returning to the seat. For the first time since the depletion, type charge returning if the silhouette on the horizon just replaced the museum quality stillness with the returning charge of anticipation, and the empty seat that was being preserved without expecting is now being held with the approaching ship awareness that the early seasons carried before the depletion, because a visible ship on a previously empty horizon rewrites everything the flatness was teaching about whether the seat would ever be occupied. Let me show you what your life looks like now that the silhouette is on the horizon, and the charge is returning to the seat, and the frequency is confirmed as carrying a real ship toward a real docking, because a person whose ocean just produced its first visible vessel moves through the remaining water at an awareness the empty horizon version could never sustain. My dear one, the first thing that changes is the beautiful moments. You have been experiencing beauty alone, sunsets without a shoulder, good news without a matching excitement. The specific, unshared, would have been better with Somyon quality that beauty carries when it arrives at a person whose seat beside them is empty. The beauty was real. The experiencing was solo, and solo experiencing of shared design beauty is what produced the erosion the empty seasons accumulated. The beautiful moments are about to become transmissions, shared in advance across the frequency. My beloved child, the mornings change permanently. You have been waking into the empty seat. The first conscious awareness of each day, registering the familiar absence beside you, that the museum stillness was maintaining as the default morning condition. Tomorrow you wake with a ship on the horizon. The seat is still empty, but the horizon is not. And a person who wakes to an empty seat with a ship on the horizon processes the emptiness differently from a person who wakes to an empty seat with an empty horizon. The horizon changes the morning, even before the seat is filled. Your transmission is strengthening. The signal that weakened under the conclusion that the transmitter was defective is being restored to full power by the evidence of a ship on the horizon, whose presence confirms the frequency was always functional, and the transmission was always being received by a vessel the viewer could not see. Restored signal strength changes what the other ship receives, and what the other ship receives at full strength accelerates the closing. People around you are going to notice the restored signal before they see the ship, because a person whose transmission just returned to full strength after a season of weakened broadcasting produces an atmospheric shift that others register as something fundamentally different about the way the person occupies the space beside their empty seat. My beloved child, the ones who knew you during the depleted season, who sensed the museum stillness, who observed the specific quality of a person holding a seat with preservation energy rather than anticipation energy, who perhaps attributed the stillness to contentment, when the stillness was actually the depletion of expectation in a person whose horizon had been empty long enough to convert the anticipation into ache. Those people are about to encounter the full signal version. They will say something woke up in you. They will mean the frequency restored. My child, there is a specific quality a person carries when their transmission returns to full power after a season of weakened signal. The quality is not desperation renewed. It is the specific, evidence-based ship on the horizon. My frequency was never broken, restored confidence that a transmitter produces when the transmission it sent into what felt like emptiness just produced visual confirmation of a receiving vessel on the horizon. The quality is confirmed frequency, and confirmed frequency broadcasts at a range the weakened signal could not reach. I need you to understand why I placed both ships at the distance I placed them, rather than positioning them closer together, so the docking would have occurred in the season the longing first awakened. My beloved child, I could have positioned the ships within visible range from the beginning. The transmission would have been immediate. The silhouette would have appeared on the first scan. The docking would have occurred in the early season, when the anticipation charge was full, and the seat beside you was being held with the expectation that the occupying was imminent. I chose the distance, and the distance was not indifference. My child, ships that dock at short distance produce short crossing connections. The connection is real, the docking is genuine, but the depth of what two captains carry into a short crossing docking is the depth that a short ocean produces, which is limited because short crossings do not develop the specific ocean-tested, storm-serving, signal-maintaining across vast distance quality that long crossings develop in the captains who endure them. Long crossings produce deep captains, and deep captains produce deep dockings. My dear one, I chose you for the long crossing because the connection I am bringing you into is a connection that requires two captains whose depth matches. A shallow captain docking with a deep captain produces a mismatched vessel whose joint sailing cannot sustain what the deep crossing calibrated journey ahead requires. The depth must match, and matching depth requires matching distance. The person transmitting toward you has been crossing their own long ocean. Their seat has been empty at the same duration level yours has. Their horizon has been scanned with the same frequency of emptiness yours has produced, and their signal weakened under the same conclusion yours weakened under. The conclusion that the transmitter was defective when the transmitter was always functional, and the distance was always the variable. Two deep captains, crossing the same distance, developing the same depth, approaching the same coordinates. I need you to understand why I placed both ships at the distance I placed them, rather than positioning them closer together, so the docking would have occurred in the season the longing first awakened. My beloved child, I could have positioned the ships within visible range from the beginning. The transmission would have been immediate. The silhouette would have appeared on the first scan. The docking would have occurred in the early season when the anticipation charge was full, and the seat beside you was being held with the expectation that the occupying was imminent. I chose the distance, and the distance was not indifference. My child, ships that dock at short distance produce short crossing connections. The connection is real, the docking is genuine, but the depth of what two captains carry into a short crossing docking is the depth that a short ocean produces, which is limited because short crossings do not develop the specific, ocean-tested, storm-surviving, signal-maintaining across vast distance quality that long crossings develop in the captains who endure them. Long crossings produce deep captains, and deep captains produce deep dockings. My dear one, I chose you for the long crossing because the connection I am bringing you into is a connection that requires two captains whose depth matches. A shallow captain docking with a deep captain produces a mismatched vessel whose joint sailing cannot sustain what the deep crossing calibrated journey ahead requires. The depth must match, and matching depth requires matching distance. The person transmitting toward you has been crossing their own long ocean. Their seat has been empty at the same duration level yours has. Their horizon has been scanned with the same frequency of emptiness yours has produced. And their signal weakened under the same conclusion yours weakened under. The conclusion that the transmitter was defective, when the transmitter was always functional and the distance was always the variable. Two deep captains, crossing the same distance, developing the same depth, approaching the same coordinates. The doubt surfacing right now is using the most loneliness-hardened objection in its inventory. The voice that says silhouettes on horizons have appeared before in the form of people who seemed like they could be the one and turned out to be passing ships whose frequency was similar but not matching. My child, it sounds like this. I have seen shapes on my horizon before. I have detected signals that felt like pattern rather than ambient. I have experienced the charge returning to the seat only to watch the shape dissolve into a vessel that was not heading toward me, but was crossing my field of vision on a trajectory, aimed somewhere else entirely. The almost ships were real. The almost frequencies were close. The disappointment of a passing ship that was not the matching vessel was worse than the empty horizon, because the passing ship raised the expectation the empty horizon had stopped producing. That doubt just used the passing ships as evidence against the approaching one, and the evidence fails against one navigational fact. My beloved child, passing ships do not produce mutual detection. A passing ship crosses the horizon without the receiver registering the specific, both sides detecting, frequency-confirmed pattern that mutual detection generates. Passing ships produce one-side interest. The viewer's receiver detects a signal, but the signal does not carry the structural pattern of a matched frequency aimed at the viewer's coordinates. The interest is one-directional. The signal is misread, and the shape that appeared on the horizon exits the horizon without ever having been aimed at the person who was watching it. This ship produced mutual detection. Both receivers are registering. Both transmitters are confirmed. Both ships are aimed at converging coordinates rather than crossing trajectories. And mutual detection on converging coordinates is the navigational signature that no passing ship has ever produced on your horizon. Passing ships cross. This ship converges, and convergence is not crossing. Type convergence confirmed if the doubt used previous passing ships as evidence against this approach. And you now understand passing ships produce one-sided interest on crossing trajectories, while this ship produced mutual detection on converging coordinates. And mutual detection on converging coordinates is the navigational signature that no passing ship has ever generated on your horizon, because passing ships cross while this ship is aimed at the same docking point yours is. During every season, the horizon was empty. I was not at the other ship's coordinates, managing their course while leaving your ship to sail the empty ocean without navigation. I was at both ships, simultaneously, adjusting both headings, managing both currents, ensuring both vessels were covering the distance that the convergence coordinates required, while both captains were scanning empty horizons and concluding the ocean contained only water. My beloved child, you imagined a God who was working on one side of the connection while the other side waited unattended, whose involvement with the other ship's course consumed the navigational attention that your ship needed to maintain its heading toward coordinates the captain could not see. A God whose management of the convergence was sequential rather than simultaneous, bringing one ship into position before turning attention to the other. Both ships were managed at the same time, by the same hands, across the same ocean. My child, there were nights during the empty horizon season when the longing was at its heaviest, when the seat beside you was producing its deepest ache, and the ocean was showing its flattest horizon, and the transmission you were sending felt like it was entering water that would never return a signal. On those nights, I was at your ship and at their ship in the same moment, holding both headings, adjusting both courses for the same current that was affecting both vessels differently based on their position in the ocean. The same current that slowed your ship was accelerating theirs, and the same current that slowed theirs was accelerating yours. The currents were working the convergence from both directions simultaneously. My dear one, the nights you felt most alone on the ocean were the nights both ships were covering the most distance toward each other, because the currents I was managing for the convergence produce their strongest effect during the seasons the captains felt stationary, were converging both ships every night. I know the exact night the longing reached the depth where the seat beside you stopped feeling like a space being held and started feeling like a wound being carried. The specific evening where the ache crossed from manageable to identity level, and the person holding the seat concluded that the holding itself was the source of the pain, rather than the emptiness the holding was enduring. My dear one, not the first night of longing. Both captains reached the same conclusion, at the same depth, on the same ocean. My child, the matching depth of the identical conclusion is the evidence that the frequency calibration is precise. Two transmitters calibrated to the same frequency do not merely send on the same channel. They produce the same emotional responses at corresponding depths, because the frequency carries the resonance of the matching, and the resonance produces identical ache patterns in both receivers at proportional distances from the convergence point. The God who knows your deepest night knows theirs, and the matching is the frequency's proof. Type same depth if God just revealed that the other ship's captain reached the same conclusion at the same depth of longing. The same holding became the wound, should I stop scanning night. And the matching depth of identical conclusion across two separate ships is the evidence that the frequency calibration is precise, because transmitters on the same channel produce identical emotional responses at corresponding depths, and the resonance is the proof of the matching. Now that the silhouette is on the horizon, and the frequency is confirmed, and the convergence coordinates are producing the closing that both ships have been sailing toward, there is one thing I need you to do, my beloved child, and it is the instruction that determines whether the docking that the convergence is producing arrives at a captain whose ship is prepared to receive the vessel that is approaching. Restore the seat, not continue holding it with museum-quality preservation. Restore it. The specific anticipation charged. Someone is actually coming. This seat is about to be occupied restoration that converts a preserved space into a prepared one. Preserved spaces hold emptiness. Prepared spaces hold readiness. And the ship approaching your coordinates requires a prepared docking surface, rather than a preserved memorial to the absence of the vessel that is now visible on the horizon. My child, restoring the seat is a specific act. It means removing the museum stillness that the depletion installed over the space beside you. It means recharging the anticipation that the empty horizon drained. It means approaching the seat with the specific, this is no longer a memorial to what did not arrive. This is a preparation for what is arriving energy that converts the space from held to ready. The space must be ready, not merely held. When the restoration begins, the depletion will resist. The depletion was installed by the empty horizon, and the empty horizon governed the seat's quality for the duration of the waiting. The resistance is the depletion's memory objecting to the restoration's charge. The resistance is not wisdom, it is residue. And residue from an empty horizon does not carry authority over a horizon that now contains a visible approaching ship. The ship is on the horizon. The horizon has changed, and a changed horizon authorizes a changed seat. From preserved to prepared, from memorial to ready, from museum stillness to anticipatory charge, restore the seat. The person it was held for is approaching. You made it to the visible ship, my beloved child, and I need you to stand at the deck of your vessel long enough to feel what it means to see a silhouette on a horizon that has been empty for every season of the waiting, and to know the ship approaching is the ship whose frequency has been matching yours since before the longing began. Feel the approach, not the emptiness the horizon was producing during every previous scan, not the depletion that converted the anticipation into ache, not the comparison with ships that docked sooner on shorter crossings. The approach, the specific silhouette growing, distance closing, frequency confirmed, mutual detection active, converging coordinates, both captains scanning and both captains seeing, approach of a ship that was always on the same ocean, transmitting on the same channel, aimed at the same docking point. The viewer's ship has been sailing toward. The approach is real, and real approach on a confirmed frequency after a season of empty horizon is the most sacred navigational event an ocean can produce. I want to thank you for something the empty ocean made almost impossible to sustain. Thank you for transmitting. Thank you for sending prayers and longing into what felt like water that would never return a signal. Thank you for holding the seat through the museum season, when the holding carried no expectation and the preservation was performed by a person whose anticipation had been fully depleted by duration. My dear child, thank you for not releasing the seat, because a captain who releases the seat before the ship arrives is a captain whose vessel has no prepared docking surface when the convergence coordinates produce the meeting. You held through the depletion, through the comparison. Through the night, the holding became the wound. And the holding is why the seat is available for restoration right now. Let the tears come, not loneliness tears, not empty horizon tears, approach tears. The tears of a captain seeing a ship on a horizon that has been empty for the entire crossing, finally receiving the visual confirmation that the frequency was never broken and the ocean was never empty, and the person they have been transmitting toward has been transmitting back the entire time. Type approach tears if tears are forming right now, because the silhouette on the horizon is growing closer, and the frequency is confirmed. And the seat that was held through every season of museum-quality stillness is about to receive the person it was always being preserved for. And the tears are not loneliness, but the sacred overwhelm of a captain whose empty ocean just produced the approaching ship the transmission was always aimed at. You are not the captain scanning an empty horizon anymore, my beloved child. That identity, the one who transmitted into what felt like an ocean returning nothing, the one whose longing was the unrecognized reception of a signal already being sent toward them, before the conscious mind identified the ache as reception, the one who watched other ships dock on shorter crossings and concluded the transmitter was defective, the one whose anticipation depleted into museum-quality stillness at a seat that was held without expecting the holding to ever produce the occupying, the one whose deepest night produced the conclusion that the ocean was a solo crossing and the seat was a wound rather than a space. That identity was permanently retired the moment the silhouette appeared above the waterline, and the frequency was confirmed as mutual, and the horizon that had been empty for every season of the waiting produced its first visible evidence that the ocean was never carrying only water between two ships that were always aimed at each other. You are the captain, with a ship on the horizon now, and horizon changes everything the emptiness was saying. The empty ocean identity that governed your transmission strength, your relationship with the seat, your comparison with shorter crossings, your conclusion about the transmitter, and your museum-quality preservation of a space you had stopped believing would be occupied, has been permanently replaced by the approaching ship identity. The specific, frequency confirmed, mutual detection active, silhouette growing, convergence coordinates closing identity of a captain whose ocean just produced the vessels the frequency was always connected to. My dear child, the ship is approaching, the frequency is confirmed, and the captain on the other vessel has been crossing the same distance, enduring the same empty horizon, reaching the same depth of identical conclusion, and transmitting on the same channel with the same longing that your ship has been carrying across every nautical mile of the same ocean. From this moment forward, you carry the identity of a captain whose God manages convergence coordinates across oceans. Not a person whose ocean is empty, a person whose ocean was always carrying two ships toward each other on a frequency calibrated by the God who assigned both channels before either captain knew the other existed. Not a person whose seat is a wound, a person whose seat is about to receive the person it was always being held for, the person whose ship has been approaching from beyond the visible horizon on a course the God at the crossing point has been managing from both sides simultaneously. The seat is being restored, the charge is returning, the silhouette is growing, and the captain who held the seat through every season of museum stillness is about to see the face of the person whose signal they were detecting as longing before they knew the longing was reception. The longing was always reception. The reception was always mutual. The ocean was always carrying both ships. And the God who calibrated both frequencies to the same channel is the same God standing at the convergence coordinates right now, confirming that the remaining distance is the last water either ship will cross alone, because what is approaching on the horizon is not another passing vessel on a crossing trajectory, but the specific, frequency-matched, depth-matched, distance-matched, conclusion-matched ship whose docking at the convergence point is the event both transmissions have been aimed at since the first signal crossed the water. The horizon is no longer empty, my beloved child, and what fills it is approaching, and what approaches is the person whose frequency was always yours, and whose course was always toward you, and whose seat beside them was held with the same museum stillness yours was held with, and whose captain reached the same depth on the same night, and whose ship is now close enough to see, for the first time on an ocean that was never empty, but was always the distance between two people whose God placed them at coordinates, whose crossing would produce the deepest docking the ocean has ever held. Subscribe to this channel so that every time God sends a frequency update between two converging ships, the transmission reaches you before the empty horizon convinces you. The ocean contains only water. You are not a captain scanning an empty horizon anymore. You are a captain whose ship is on the horizon, and whose frequency is confirmed, and whose convergence coordinates are closing. The next message carries the first signal report from the approaching ship, and what the transmission contains will confirm that the person on the other vessel has been crossing the same ocean at the same depth on the same frequency the entire time you believed you were the only one transmitting. Type same ocean if you are leaving this message permanently changed. Knowing the longing was reception, not generation. The frequency was never broken. The ocean was never empty. The distance was longer because the docking is deeper. The other captain reached the same depth on the same night. The silhouette is visible for the first time, and the God who calibrated both frequencies to the same channel before either captain knew the other existed, is the same God standing at the convergence. Coordinates confirming that the remaining water is the last distance. Either ship will cross alone, because what is approaching is the matching vessel the transmission was always aimed at.